by our chief. Chief, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President, Council members, colleagues. So with me today, I have Deputy Chiefs Rutledge and Hardin. I'm John Schultz, your Chief of Police. So it's my pleasure to be here today as we present an update on crime in the city of Renton, including a collection of data and solutions we have implemented or are going to implement to limit the impact crime's having on our community. Next slide there. This slide's probably a bit of a review for you. I showed it also at the council retreat. I think it's really relevant as we start down the conversation of crimes that we're responding to. So it shows our calls for service and types of calls for 2023 for the types of calls, but then the calls for service dating back to 2019 to show what kind of trend it is. In 2023, our officers responded to about 75,600 calls for service in the city. Nearly half of those, you can see, involved welfare checks or investigating suspicious circumstances, persons, or vehicles. So it's kind of a misnomer how I have it printed on here. It's not calls for service, but this is case reports that were taken and the type of crimes that those involved. So we have the year to date in 2024 and then the 23 through 2019 case reports that were taken for the different calls. Now it's difficult to say when you look at this whether the trends that we already have for 24 are going to continue. As we see into the spring and summer, we typically have our greatest influx of calls for service. So you really can't make any figure out the trends based on the calls for service we have thus far to see if they hold true throughout the rest of the year. So this is probably one of the big reasons that we're here. And this is, again, one of the slides that I showed at the council retreat. But as you can see, since 2019 through our stats in 2023, we had almost a threefold increase in gun violence over that period. As administrators, for us, it also illustrates that our officers are dealing with ever-increasing scenes of violence and complicated investigations that they're being dispatched to over the years. And along with that last slide, this is obviously another one that's absolutely concerning and alarming to us. It's an increased violent crime that we can attribute to minors in our city. As you see, assaults up over 20 per firearms, robberies with firearms, and then robberies at gas stations, and the increase just involving juveniles in those. Now, this one I thought was a little bit relevant, and what it is, further demonstrating the increase in amount of firearms that we're seeing. What the graph represents is the number of firearms that were processed through our evidence intake year by year. So these aren't exactly just numbers from guns taken off the street, although they are guns off the street, but they can be taken in for a myriad of reasons, whether it be a homicide, assault, suicide, reckless endangerment, possession of stolen properties, out of stolen vehicles, forgeries, narcotics, illegal possession of a firearm or discharges, mental health reasons, court orders, burglaries, and warrants were among the reasons that we took guns into our intake in evidence. So as we talk about some of those issues we've gone through in violent crime, the big part of it is what are we doing? What solutions are we finding to help the community? So to combat the growing issue of threats of safety and the quality of life to the community, aside from the reactive measures of our patrol officers responding and doing an outstanding job with the investigations on violence, we've allocated several internal resources to proactively address violent crime. The first one is what we affectionately call our C Squad, and they're assigned to our patrol division. The reason they're called C Squad is we already have an A Squad and a B Squad. They're ancillary to all that, so they got the term C Squad. So their job is to focus on reducing violent crime. They're made up of our SWAT officers, so they have the training, skills, tactics, tools to target and safely as possible apprehend some of our most violent offenders and repeat offenders. We also have our direct enforcement and special enforcement teams There are proactive units within our special operations division that can easily pivot to address community issues. This group is also inclusive of our downtown patrols and our debt unit. And if you remember in the last budget cycle, council was kind enough to allocate 4 new officers for this purpose in the downtown patrol. They're assigned into this division. We've just recently transferred 2 more officers from our patrol division as it gets fuller over to that direct enforcement team to better utilize them in that downtown core. So along with these, we also leverage communication and engagement to enhance the crime prevention piece, in addition to our comms and engagement manager to build those relationships with the community. And that's another position that in the last budget cycle, council allocated the resources for us to fund that spot. So we'll continue to develop our community partnerships as part of our crime reduction. A big piece of this is the school resource officers. With the partnership we have with Renton School District, they work as role models and mentors within the schools. Currently, we only have one that he floats between the 3 high schools. Our goal is to have that fully staffed and at least one at every high school for the start of the 25 school year. And they also can rotate to the elementary and junior high schools as needed when there's issues that come up. We also work to enhance our partnerships that help us engage and build trust with the community, whether it's the Renton African American Pastoral Group, the Family First Center, FD Cares. One of my favorites is Project Be Free, that's doing an incredible job out in the community in partnership with the police department. And then several of the other social service groups that we worked with to provide services throughout the community. So this is another slide that I showed on the council retreat. I'm showing it here for a different reason. One of our key performance measures is our response time to calls for service. So as we look to leverage more technology and enhancing our ability to assist community, this is one of the opportunities that we see in using software that we're currently beta testing. And what it does, it allows officers to hear when the initial call for service comes in. So right now, an officer gets dispatched to a call, but that call first has to go to a call receiver. Then from a call receiver to a dispatcher, then a dispatcher sends it to the officer. What this software allows an officer to do is put a geofence around his or her district. And when a call for service initially comes into dispatch, they're alerted to that call for service so they can get that information that much quicker instead of waiting for a dispatcher to get all the information and then send it. So they can at least start that way and greatly reduce their response time to the call. We already have another way that we're looking to leverage technologies. We already have a fairly robust drone program. The next progression is we're evaluating drones as first responders to assist in 911 calls for service. I know we briefed some of you on that. This is being able to have eyes on an incident and get real-time credible information probably within a minute of the initial call using that same technology where we'd have a drone pilot here at City Hall that would be able to get a drone in the air and over the incident within a minute of the call coming into service. This is, that way we can either, if the call for service came in and said someone with a gun, we can get there and evaluate the situation and either increase our response or decrease it, based on what the officer's seen as it gets on scene. Another use of technology that's going to be for investigations. The other ones were for patrol driven. This one's for investigations following it is a new camera system. It's called Flock, where it sits at certain intersections throughout the city. And it's almost like license plate vehicle readers, except on steroids, where it can capture a lot more information about vehicles. So we can get, if we just have a simple description of a vehicle that's fled the scene of a crime, we can get more information from it based on the Flock camera. And this is a system that several cities throughout the area have, and they intertwine and work together. So we can say, okay, we need everything that's in King County that matches the description. And it's just a great tool to have as it comes down to investigating more crimes. So there's really a lot of opportunity when it comes to technology and advancement of public safety that we're looking to help us as we look to investigate some of these. So transparency to the community. This is one of the big ones that I think we work really hard for. And what I'm showing here is a dashboard that we're hoping to publish out on our website for community to see, but this will give them real-time crime statistics and what they look like in the community. So we understand that, in order to be successful in our end, it's a partnership with our community. And we've always said that police work isn't something you do to a community or for a community, but something you do with the community. So it's just aids in that partnership. And it's one piece that, we always talk about engagement and transparency that we're looking to really boost as we go forward. So this represents an interactive crime dashboard, and we'll have available on our website, but we're also looking to put a myriad of other things out there, which would include update on our use of force dashboard, policies, some feedback. I mentioned at the retreat, the My 90 surveys that we send out. So being able to give the community an idea of how we're doing. Reporting parties that have called, that affects the reporting parties that have called 911. But we really want to be transparent in what we're doing and show that we're not hiding anything, and people should be able to go to our website and get most of the questions that they're looking for answered. So it's my final slide. I just want to say we take a lot of pride in our organization and the great work that they do in service and support of our community. So I want to appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I know that was a quick flyover of what it looked like, but I assumed there'd probably be more questions coming from it than you guys wanted to hear me just talk about what the data looks like.
Any questions from council?
Mr. President.
Yes.
Actually, I have two questions, but I'll start with the recovered firearms
Yes, ma'am.
are destroyed.
Yes. Well, and I'd say that it depends on how they're recovered. If some we have for safekeeping and then they have to go back to the owner, then that happens. But if we've taken one off the street, as soon as if it stays within our possession, it's destroyed. We don't resell and we don't convert them for our use.
Councilmember Perez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief. Great presentation. One of the biggest concerns, I say one, because there are several concerns of our community regarding public safety, has been speeding. And since the terrible fatality that happened in Fairwood, where unfortunately children lost their lives, and a teenager was involved, and the whole thing around the whole situation was very sad.
Really tragic.
Yeah, and a tragedy. We have received emails asking us to do something about it. Again, the line between Fairwood and Renton is almost non-existent, except when it's elections. Other than that, and budget, obviously, and snow and so many other things. But anyway, they're asking us to react. They are asking us to do better, to do more, to make the city safer. They feel that speeding these kind of accidents can be prevented. That's the way they see it. What are your thoughts about this?
So going back to your question a little bit, when you say they can be prevented 100%, but that, has to do more with the offender, right? How do we get to that person and make sure they're not doing stupid actions like that individual was? And that's a conversation we're having today. Hopefully you've seen in several of our media posts going back probably last month, we've been doing a lot of speed emphasis throughout the city. And we were having the conversation today is that we do own part of that road, right? We don't own that intersection, but going down northbound down the hill, we do. Part of that road is ours, just a little ways from there. So we fully intend on doing the same type of emphasis in that area and have it ongoing. So at least we can hopefully be in people's mindsets when they're going through there, is that there's the potential for police intervention if you choose to break the law through there.
May I have a...
Let me get Councilmember Vaughn. Then
Oh, yeah, of course.
Councilmember Vaughn, Councilmember Albertson, and then O'Halloran and Perez for your follow-ups.
I'm very interested to know a little bit more in terms of the block program. As you mentioned, it's like basically there's more detailed information, not just licensed reader. And so to what extent is it capturing driver's faces particularly? And then second is, while other cities are using it, are there opportunities in terms of partnership, in terms of data sharing with other cities?
Yeah, and so I'll answer the second part of that first. That's one of the beauties of the program is, yeah, there's data sharing amongst all the agencies that use it, even up and down. We recently used it in one of our cases where the suspect ended up down in California, and we were able to identify his vehicle based on it going through a flock camera system down in California. It does not capture the person driving. So it's just, and when I say it's like a license plate reader on steroids, it gives all the identifying factors of that vehicle. Like we say we're looking for a white van missing the front driver's side hubcap or something that specific. It'll actually go through all the video images it has and capture all those vehicles that match that. Or looking for a specific type of bumper sticker or something on a car, it would be able to match that. So it's taking the identifiables that are on the vehicle that are easily in plain public view and capturing those.
Councilmember Albertson.
Yeah, Chief, I know this is a crime update, but you said at the beginning, kind of you're going to share some of the things you were doing or whatever. I'm most interested right now in the youth, juvenile increase and that sort of thing, and given the relative, I don't know, maybe narrow parameters that you have to do anything, what I'm sure the public will want to know, what are we trying to do again about that? Because it's becoming more and more, I think people are just getting fed up.
Right, and you can see, yeah, understandably, and we have highlighted a couple cases recently that we've dealt with. So we're doing several things. I mean, first off, we're trying to engage the youth as much as we can. We have youth academies planned, our school resource officers in the school, working with other groups like Family First Center and everything else to try to engage youth in a positive way. And I mentioned our school resource officers. I think for us in law enforcement, they're kind of the first line in that, being able to identify potential issues and get upstream of those with kids that may be teetering on the border of, going one way or another. So really working with the school and advocating for more youth programs to get ahead of that. And I think, that's part of the comments that came at last week's council meeting from that young lady advocating for the same thing, is we really need to have our youth engaged and involved and have something else they can do besides turn to the violent nature or, understand that certain things that their peers are doing may conflict with what's in the best interest of themselves or the community.
A follow-up, but you can come back.
Councilmember Rivera, and then we'll start on the follow-ups. We're going to do follow-ups after.
Sorry. My apologies, President. I was following the order, and then I thought I was going to go after Perez. So maybe I can follow up on that. What type of engagement are we doing? Because the Youth Academy is for middle schoolers, and I think the kind of population we're gearing towards the Youth Academy may not be the kids that we're coming in contact with, that we're speaking to in some of these frustrating, the repeat offenders, what you and I spoke to, more violent offenders. So I guess I want to get more in the weeds of how we're specifically engaging these youth.
The youth that are actually out committing the crimes,
Yes.
Besides hopefully investigating and arresting them when they've done that. But I think also when we do that, it's probably in much more of a broader conversation, but that's an opportunity for that intervention when we have them in a safe and secure location. And that's where partnering with whatever social services group that can either help them get them the issues, maybe, understand the why that they're committing the crime, and also get resources to the family. So once they've been through with the hope of rehabilitation, have the tools for them and resources when they get out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember O'Halloran.
Thank you. So regarding going upstream with the youth, have we given any thought to expanding our resource officers into the middle schools?
We'd love to, and we've had that conversation with the schools, and actually that's the community has also identified that as that age group when you can really have probably the greatest impact. So yes, it is something, and that's where when I say they're assigned to the high schools, they also are assigned to the specific feeder middle schools that go to that high school. So they are available to help out, and they are a presence in those middle schools right now. And it's an agreement, obviously, with the school district. You know, we've identified having them in the high schools having the greatest impact, at least for the safety of those students there, which is also a concern. So yeah, we would love to be able to double down on that and have them in the middle schools too. So maybe that's something we can look to in the future to be able to have them there. But honestly, having the capacity within our staffing limits us being able to have them in both places.
Thank you.
Councilmember McGurven.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I was also going to go after everyone else, but that's okay. The question I have, well, first I want to give a +1 for engagement in the middle schools. I definitely think that's an area we should be focusing for sure. And I apologize for coming in late, so maybe this was covered a little bit on the slide I'm looking at regarding juvenile firearm cases, and there's another slide also that shows the increased number of firearms. It's not a surprise. We know a lot of the firearm sales went through the roof during the pandemic. Do we have any tracking on where youth are getting firearms from? Are they coming from homes? And if so, is there accountability for the parents or the person for safe storage of that firearm?
So I don't have that data with me. I'm sorry. So I'd hate to even guess on where they're getting them.
Sorry.
Yeah. You know, the possibility is that probably a majority of them are stolen. And again, you know, either people leaving them in their vehicles when their vehicle gets stolen, I think is probably the relevant hypothesis of where they come from. But yeah, sorry, I can't say specifically where they are coming from.
It would be great to know, and that would be another one of those upstream things, I think. I mean, and if that's something we're not tracking, that we could find a way to track that back.
Councilmember Perez.
Thank you. I'm gonna keep with that theme. I was having this conversation with Councilmember Rivera. Every youth that is in the board there of committing a crime or is engaging in activity that probably is not for the benefit of anybody has an adult behind that should be responsible guiding them. And I know that some of these parents are struggling with the same. Are struggling because they don't know what to do. In my time, my mom says stop and I stop. These days, they don't. They apparently, some of them don't listen. And they are asking for help. They are saying, what can we do as parents? How can we help them? And this includes the preventive on the very early age, not just middle school, but before they get to that level, what parents can do to help their children to not get involved in activities that are not beneficial for anybody.
Right.
Are we engaging with parents in any form or way to the ones that want help? Because I know that others, I don't know.
I think when we get the calls from those parents that are looking for assistance, yeah, I think we're directing them to the right places. And again, I'll highlight the Family First Center, what an awesome resource that is for community and for families to be able to get that help and a positive place, you know, for kids to develop versus not having positive role models or someone there to help guide them, you know, saying what's right and what's wrong.
Councilmember Halverson.
Yeah, Chief. So, listen, I'm all for going upstream and preventative. Quite frankly, we can go to preschools as far as I'm concerned, but I'm also all for accountability and responsibility. And when it happens, what are we doing as well? We're not going to save everybody. That's just a fact. No one seems to really want to address that. I know that's maybe where you're maybe handcuffed, if you will, to, you know, to really, I'm into a comprehensive type of deal on the front, in the middle, and on the back. From an accountability standpoint, the kids, the parents, they know wrong from right. They're choosing to do wrong, and there could be many factors. Parents as well, not just the parents who are reaching out, but maybe the parents who aren't reaching out, who are apathetic, who are, I don't know, clueless. I mean, that's really, I think, ultimately when we put a dent in this now versus, I don't know, in 10 years or so. Can you just speak to just what's happening? You know, I talked to you more recently, because I saw some comments, the two who were pulled the guns on the 10-year-olds, and okay, well, they were released to the parents. Okay, not enough information. People don't want to hear that necessarily. You know, this 18-year-old who did the 112 miles an hour, and it's different, but he had totaled 2 cars, previously, you know, in speeding incidents beforehand. I mean, at some point we've lost. It seems we've lost a huge level of accountability and responsibility, and we have to find a way to get back in some kind of way. Deterrence. I don't know, but what would you say to that?
No, I agree. There has to be consequences for your actions, right? You're talking about accountability, and that's really where it lies, regardless if they're a juvenile or an adult. And I could say that a number of our juvenile cases do involve repeat offenders. And so I could say, we're doing our part. We're investigating, arresting, and transporting them to the juvenile youth center. What happens once they get to the youth center? And then this is probably one of the pieces, and we had the conversation today with Councilmember Rivera, is kind of everyone pointing their fingers that we're not to blame, but I don't think we should be here to point fingers and lay blame, right? It's to the point where this is a serious enough public safety issue. We have to sit down and find out what actions we can take to get past that. And that was probably why we're trying to highlight some of this, is to get people to the table to discuss. And again, I've said it a little bit earlier, when they are incarcerated, it gives that opportunity to build in some of those resources and find out what can we do. But there's still consequences for your actions. You're being put in a lockup, someplace, whether we have to, make sure that those locations are being funded by the legislature, so we have a place to put them. I understand the overcrowding issue, especially when it comes to juveniles. That's an issue that they're looking at. That say if it's not safe for us to incarcerate some of these people, then we're going to release them to their parents on the promise that they don't do some again. Well, guess what? That's not happening. So that they just continue to offend. So I agree with you, and there should be more consequences for the actions when they're choosing to violate the law.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
So you said that, and it made me have a thought. I know there's been talk about getting rid of the juvenile jail. What do we do in a future where we don't have a facility for juveniles when they, run into a car at 112 miles an hour or whatever it might be?
So, right.
Are we putting them with adults then? Is that...
Well, I don't know what the consequence would that be. I don't think you can legally put a juvenile in an adult jail with them. So we're left with, right? There's no consequences for them whatsoever. But I think it opened in 2020 at the taxpayer's expense of $250 million. Now you're looking at shutting down a perfectly good facility that was put there for a purpose. And whether it's incarcerate, rehabilitate, give services, the whole myriad of it shouldn't be shut down.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Rivera, Perez, O'Halloran, and then Vaughn.
Hey, Chief. How you doing? Yeah. I wanted to touch base because we just had a conversation per the agenda. We're going to try to touch on juvenile crime at the next public safety meeting, which I really do appreciate. I do want to talk about accountability and responsibility, because I think what we're missing here as well is kind of the big picture, because there is kind of that disconnect between local law enforcement and then like a state juvenile correctional agencies. A lot of people don't know, and you weren't aware until we spoke, that in the last 2 years, Washington State Legislature chose to close Nassau Youth Camp. This is one of 3 juvenile institutions in the state of Washington, which drastically changed the demographics for those juvenile prisons. In addition, we also changed the juvenile minimum for juvenile life from 21 to 25. So when you think about those demographic changes and the closing of Nassau Youth Camp, the juvenile prisons are completely at max. There are incidences I've heard of recent, because I worked at Echo Glen for 5 years. I worked in maximum security for 2 years. And then I worked in the community with just as involved in youth who were dropped out of high school for another couple years in King County. Green Hill Schools had a number of fentanyl overdose and near deaths with their kids. These aren't drugs that are coming in by the kids, they're being brought in by the staff. There's major issues happening in Green Hill School that is dangerous. I wouldn't want to send any child right now to Green Hill School because of the amount of fentanyl overdoses and dangers that are happening in that facility. Additionally, this hasn't been made public, but I've been made aware that as of last week, kids are getting bunked up at Echo Glen, and there was recently a rape that occurred. A kid was forced to give fellatio to another kid because they were bumped up. Youth who sexually offend are getting bunked up in rooms together. I don't know what DCYF is thinking, but it's not safe to be sending these kids to these facilities. Additionally, I don't know what Dow Constantine was thinking to announce closing the youth jail at the height of these incidences that we are experiencing. Both are really bad situations for us. And what I want to implore for us is to build these relationships with KCPO and DCYF, because that's where the disconnect is happening. I believe RPD is doing everything they can with the resources and the limits that you have, but you can only do what you can is investigate and arrest. Those are pretty much your limitations. You aren't social workers. You're not made to be social workers, though you do a great job the best you can with working with Project Be Free and Family First. I applaud you. But I think we also need to think about inviting King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office and the Juvenile Division over here to talk about their numbers, their data, what they're doing. But also, I want to get DCYF in here, because they're the ones that are working with these kids trying to rehabilitate them. And if we need to bring the King County Executive's Office to talk about the zero-use detention, we need to do that as well, because hitting it upstream is the only way this is going to decrease. Because until then, I worked in corrections for 5 years. The reason I left, it was so frustrating to see the kids that kept going and coming back and going and coming back. I get the frustration from RPD side because I've lived it. So I think those are really the next steps, and I really just want to applaud you guys on what you're doing, because I know you guys are frustrated on your end, because we also don't want to impede kids' due process and probable cause. Because the minute we start playing games with that, we're impeding on people's rights, and that's when it starts getting dangerous. And so I know you guys are just limited in what you can do, and thank you on that, but I think we really need to start bringing in some other agents, because it's not all on you guys.
Councilmember Perez, Councilmember Howland, Councilmember Vaughn.
Yeah, I'm gonna change the topic, Chief. I'm gonna go back to the speeding. Thanks to how efficient your communication department is, I have been able to follow up a lot of the responses from the community about the speeding enforcement. However, I want to know what are the reactions of those people that had been caught and had to not an infraction, because I did remember a time that we ended up in the news because the number of tickets that we were giving, because people that were, passing a light, and we have a camera there, and they were like complaining about how many tickets we were giving. I know that most people are very happy about the enforcement of the speeding. I think it's the right thing. Don't take me wrong. I'm completely in support of this. But I'm wondering about the people that are now have been caught and been ticketed by these actions, how they're responding.
I wish I could say, I'm sorry, I don't have the information about how they're responding, but I think, again, it goes to that accountability piece that we've been talking about, especially Councilmember Albertson. They're the ones at fault for it. They have no other excuses. They understand, this posted speed limit, and if they're getting a ticket for it, then I'm not sure what reaction except one of guilt that they should have.
Maybe I'm expressing myself incorrect. Have you received any emails complaining?
I have not received one email of complaint. All I've seen is the community outpour of encouragement for continuing to do it.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Howland.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to reinforce the idea of not only do we have to hold these perpetrators accountable, but I think we need to find a way to hold King County accountable for what they're doing especially when these children come into their system, and what is their role and responsibility to us as a city with regard to the people that we are sending to them.
And I agree. I think so much is being put out on empathizing with the suspects in some of these, that what's being forgotten about is the impact they're having on the victim and the community. So absolutely agree.
Councilmember Vaughn.
I wanted to ask you regarding to juveniles and crimes. Do we have any data regarding to their residence? Is it juveniles residing in Renton, or is it just you do not know the answer? Do we have any data regarding to that?
I do not have that with me, but that's something we can follow up on at Public Safety next Monday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? You have a question? Go ahead.
I really like the when you introduced us to Flock, and I kind of want to hear more. I think on public safety going forward, like on some of the technology, because one of the things that I particularly was curious is if RPD has explored, similar to Redmond PD, the GPS style kind of trackers that they implemented last year. I think it was about February 2023, and I know Granicus had an article on it, but it was like basically the way I describe it is like the little Batman trackers where they could shoot something like Batman, it would stick on the car, and they could just like track it like a GPS style.
Right, it's kind of like a pursuit intervention technique almost.
Yeah.
When a vehicle starts taking off at you, if you're close enough and have the ability to, and if it sticks to it, you can track the vehicle without having to actually be lights and sirens behind it pursuing it. It's much safer way of doing it. There's several, I think, new technology that's coming out to try to make pursuits either a thing of the past or make them much safer, whether it's like webbing that can go underneath the tire to immobilize the vehicle or several other things. But yeah, we're looking at a lot of the technology that can make doing that much safer for the officer, the community, and to the suspect.
All right. Thank you, Chief. The committee of the whole meeting will recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)(I). With no official action to be taken, the committee of the whole meeting will be adjourned when the executive session is adjourned. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.